Islam is my sight. Now my
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this episode of The Straight Path. I'm your host, Feroz Abdul Rahman. We've been discussing many issues on The Straight Path for the past few weeks, but this week I'm very excited to be presenting a new topic, and this topic is going to be about knowledge. Inshallah, today's topics are going to be centered around 4 specific issues. We're going to let the guests do a lot of the talking, and they're going to focus on 4 different aspects. They're going to talk about what their thoughts were about knowledge before they came into Islam, when they're researching into Islam, what they thought about knowledge then, right after becoming Muslim, when they first took the Shahada, what sort of knowledge were they seeking out then? And then, once they learned the basic tenets of the religion, once they came into Islam, once they understood it, where did this path of knowledge take them? Today's main guest, by the way, is Brother Abdullah. We're going to talk a lot about him, more about his journey, inshallah, and the brothers will be involved also. So it seems like the stage here is kind of split. 3 people to Islam because you read the Quran, you read that book, you had a history course, you went through it because of experience.
Actually, the guy who told me about Islam was a Muslim, and it was after a club at 3 in the morning drinking liquor. This is how I found out about Islam. And Allah Mustan, alhamdulillah, Allah, alhamdulillah, had mercy to guide me.
So, we've kind of heard from you brothers about what you thought about knowledge before becoming a Muslim, kind of have gauged why you came into Islam. Would anyone like to add something about that moment when, you actually said, yeah, this is it, I'm going to take Islam?
Before that, Sheikh, I just want to ask you something. You hear about prison and I see your face and you're like, ooh, really a money issue and gangs and so on. SubhanAllah, Umar, radiallahu anhu, he said he feared the day that the Muslims would not know Jahiliyyah. And there's wisdom in this. Because when you live so wrong and you're such in darkness, when the light comes, it's very apparent and clear.
It's true. And appreciate it.
You appreciate it.
Appreciate more. It's
You appreciate the sweetness of Islam. When I became Muslim, alhamdulillah, or when I found Islam, I felt a responsibility to never turn my back on Allah. Because if He got me out of the situation that I was in, I would be wrong and just unjust to myself if I ever turned back around. So this is, and you see the Sahaba, even Abu Dhar. Abu Dhar was one of the Sahabas, he was strong. He used to attack caravans. He was a thief. Yeah, And so what happens when these people became Muslim? And the people in Mecca were very strong, in their Jahiliyyah.
So we've heard from your experiences, inshallah. How about telling us a little bit about when you first became Muslim? I'm sure you must have been bombarded with questions about, knowledge. Everyone's out there searching for knowledge. What did you guys feel then?
one of the things that made me seek knowledge, because after reading that book and I changed immediately, I just wanted to share this truth with everybody. I wanted to tell everybody about Islam. And when I read the Quran, I wanted everybody to know about this message. And I was scared that if I didn't deliver this message, Allah will question me. I used to go to school with Quran, and I wasn't even praying then. I'll go with the Quran and say, look, Allah says this about the Day of Judgment, and so on and so forth. From that point, a lot of questions starts to come. Now, when those questions come, like Allah orders in the Quran, you have to ask the people of knowledge, and you have to research and seek knowledge. So when you start practicing, you call in others, and they're asking you questions, you start to seek, And this reminded me of one person who wasn't practicing Islam at all in the university, and there was another Christian there. And this Christian used to debate with him all the time. He didn't pray, he didn't know nothing about Islam. So when the Christian started to ask him questions about Islam and debate him and tell him about Islam, he went and researched about Islam. So he used to debate with the Christians, and he used to defeat him in this debate. One of the people watching this debate in the class, it was a girl, she said, I'm becoming a Muslim. And this person still wasn't praying. And that time she was living with her boyfriend, they had children and everything. And she became such a strong Muslim, the boyfriend said, I'm also becoming a Muslim. And all family, alhamdulillah, became Muslim. And the brother is here right now studying Arabic. So when this brother saw this, it made him start to practice in Islam himself. So one of the things is that when people ask you a question, and secondly, the Quran, you can never get enough of it. And it's a knowledge that when it hits you, subhanAllah, you just want to act according to it. You just want to get more and more and more.
SubhanAllah. What about you, brother? When you first became Muslim?
I remember when I had to read the part of the translation of the Quran for my history class, and I just remember opening up the first chapter, and this is great, mashallah, this makes sense. And then the second chapter, Surah Al-Baqarah, or the cow, I remember putting it down after a few pages, said I've had enough. This is I have no doubt, you know. It's so sublime, it's so subtle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I mean, I can think of times where I'll be walking down the streets to go buy liquor, you know, and I'd see some person maybe going to the bathroom on the side of the street. This is normal in my university. Or you see, yeah, a lot of crazy things, you know, and it's just like, what is this, you know? Is this the Discovery Channel, you know? What, you know, what is this? And so it was just, that was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'd never had that thought before. Before I'd see these things and I'd feel all tight in my chest. Something's wrong with me, you know? I can't go and drink a keg of beer or something, you know? Like, that's what you're supposed to do, you know? And I wasn't able to. So it was something underhanded, it came. And yeah, it's so, the message is very powerful.
It's very powerful. It's like,
and it, you forget how powerful it is as soon as you stop thinking about it. As soon as you, I mean, we say seeking of knowledge, you don't say to become knowledgeable. So, I mean, as soon as you say you're knowledgeable, then you're ignorant. So, but you don't realize that. I mean, that's something completely different, you know. You get a PhD, I wanted to become a professor. PhD, I know everything, you know, about the subject. But no, in Islam, the more you know, the more you learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deen, the more you realize you don't know. And subhanAllah.
What was the experience like when?
My experience, like, I had decided to not seek guidance from any human being because I was betrayed by my so-called friends. And then I was like, can I ask my mother for help when she doesn't have experience of the street life? No, I cannot ask her for help. So then I was like, okay, so I'm gonna ask the one that created me. So I used to lock myself in the room and prostrate and cry and say, oh, you that created me, you know me better than myself. Show me the right way and I will not look back. And I will go forward. And I kept making that prayer. And it was amazing when I found the ayah in the Quran, just in Surah Fatiha, the first surah. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone do we worship and you alone do we ask for help. I said, this is what I'm going to do. Because I was confused. I'm like, am I going to ask this saint for help, or this saint for help, or this saint for help? And then when I read this, you alone do we worship, I said, that's what I'm going to do. You alone do we ask for help, I said, that's what I'm going to do. So then when I read the following ayah that says, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, guide us into the straight path. And I said, this is like a supplication. So I kept making this supplication. And then I read the explanation of this verse. And it said, the first step is to find the way, to look for the way. And it's very difficult because every religion in the world says this is the right way. So then, once you find the right way, the straight way, the second need is to get in that way. And this is also difficult because it takes full conviction. And the individual has to decide to change. And I used to say to myself, how can I change after 20 years? How can I just change my life and go against traffic? And then when I decided, and I read the third step, which is once you get in the way, the third need is to stay in the way. Many come, many go.
It's true.
And I said, this is what I'm going to do. So every time I continue reading the Quran for 9 months, but every day, when I will go back to the same ayah and the same explanation to remind myself. So they had a nice example. It said, the straight way is like a mountain. Once you go up, if you make a mistake, you go down. You know, so then you got to start all over again. So I put this similitude with my experience. I said, okay, now I got a job, now I got a car, now I got money. Now I got locked up, I lost my money, I lost my job, I got to start again. So I was like, I don't want this to happen. So I said, I'm going to keep trying and struggling and trying to learn. So it was struggle within myself. The only companion that I had for 9 months was the Quran. And with it, I didn't have to go to AA, Alcoholic Anonymous. I stopped drinking alcohol, which I used to drink daily. With it, I left my cigarettes, which I used to smoke daily.
It's a cure, subhanAllah.
You know, so it's like I didn't have to spend a lot of money for rehab or none of that stuff.
So how old you were? 20 years old then?
Yeah, I was 20 years old.
MashaAllah. SubhanAllah.
So tell us a little bit about your family.
After I began to practice Islam somewhat, you know, going to the masjid to pray in Fajr, I would come home and find my mother in the kitchen. And she would be making breakfast and while the rest of the family members are sleeping. And I used to read Quran in the kitchen. Once in a while I used to ask her, we like to hear one verse. And you know, about Maryam, about Jesus. We like to, okay, it's relative. This is what she believes in. As she used to be a nun. And then she decided to leave the convent and marry my dad. So after a while, I kept reading Quran to her for months. And this was before, like, it was amazing. I got married, and then my mother tells me, I miss your reading of the Quran in the morning. I can't do nothing, I'm married now. I mean, I'm married, working 7 days a week.
No.
You know, I try to like supplement it, but still it's not the same because at night, the house is very busy, TV's on, everybody's doing their thing, the food, there's no time. You know, but that morning time after Fajr, it was like a blessing. Yeah, and this is what because I felt this blessing of the Quran in Fajr when I read the ayah. When I read the ayah before I was Muslim, I used to wake up when everybody in my house was sleeping. And I used to open the Quran and read for like an hour. Make sujood and go to sleep. And be satisfied, because I was like, I did it and nobody knows. This is between me and my Creator. And I kept doing that and I used to put a little dim light, try to not make noise, you know, close the book slowly and go to sleep.
So tell us more about your mom and what happened after.
My mother, afterwards, she decided to become Muslim. She said, I believe in what the Quran says, and it's very clear, and the proofs of in creed, and the beliefs of all the prophets and the scriptures. So she was very satisfied. And she saw the power of the Quran, you know, because at times, like, I will be traveling like 2 hours distance from my house, and my car broke down. My son was like 1 year old or less, and it was winter. And then I was stuck, and the AAA didn't come to get me. So I was stuck from 9 at night to 4 in the morning. And the only thing I had on was a tape like of Nasheed, Remembrance of Allah. And she looks at me and she tells me, before Fajr, like at 4 o'clock, she tells me, Islam really made you patient. She knows that before, in 5 minutes, I would take another car and go, it's an emergency.
Oh God.
So
I shouldn't be too shocked, right?
So those things, those examples and the change and the change of use of language, because almost every sentence used to have something that you're supposed to mute in the TV, you know.
We don't have that here, so don't try it.
He's cured already, though.
Automatically just gets cured, alhamdulillah.
So with the rest of the brothers, I mean, once you did become Muslim, what did knowledge mean to you?
You know, so when you live as a non-Muslim, not even understanding that there is guidance, you literally live in a state of sickness. And this is the reason why you have to drink. This is why you have to, you know, take drugs. This is why you have to be with girls. This is why you have to do everything. Because you're finding some sort of pleasure in something because you feel sick. So to get out of ignorance, you have to ask. You have to seek the knowledge, you know. And this, you know, once I took Islam, alhamdulillah, I accepted Islam, I remembered like my whole past, the darkness of the past and everything I put my parents through and all the ignorant stuff I did. And right away, alhamdulillah, one of the first things I did is I called my mom, my mother. And I told her, I said, you know, I'd like to apologize for everything I've done before because I felt the purity, I felt a new beginning. And I said, and I want to even thank you for being the vehicle by which I was created. When she heard me, she was like, whoa, because she knew I was with a whole bunch of Muslims and she knows I was looking into Islam. And when I came home, she saw me so peaceful. She's looking at me like he got brainwashed.
We're going to get into exactly what you had to say to your mom and how she reacted, inshallah, right after this break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to The Straight Path. Before we went on to our break, Brother Mujahid was telling us how he was bombarding his mom with sorts of information.
Bombarding. You know, yeah, I mean, you're just like a kid. You found, a toy that you never knew existed. Anyway, my mother was, pretty confused about that situation. She didn't know. All she knew is that I started, like the brother was mentioning, I stopped drinking. I stopped coming home at 5, 6 in the morning. Sometimes didn't come home at all. I stopped doing that. People were calling me and I used to tell her just, I don't want to answer. I don't want to go out anymore. So she really thought I was brainwashed. I mean, she really did. But my father was a seeker of knowledge. And he always emphasized the fact that there's only one creator. I didn't grow up worshiping anything else. From my since I was a kid, my dad used to tell me all of this is created by one God.
How do you
And
come
that's the
about
only
that
one.
information?
My father, he's just naturally, and Abdullah knows him, naturally he is just, his character is like the character of Omar. He's very strong and he's very convinced. I don't know, I mean, this is just his nature. Because he used to work in agriculture. He was an agriculture engineer. So he says that from all the plants he learned and the whole creation, anytime he was studying this, he always said to himself, like, no human being or something created could have done all this. So he used to always tell me this. So my dad was very supportive, alhamdulillah, of me actually embracing Islam. And I told my father, I said, you know, because I used to make fun of him, he used to read so much. And I used to tell him, why are you always reading books? You know? And it's funny, like now I started reading and he started seeing I was changing. So I told my father, I said, you know, since you've been seeking knowledge for so long, I said, what I found here is something that you've never studied. I'd like to give you this book. And he was open. And he started reading and we used to discuss. And subhanAllah, within about 3 months, alhamdulillah, he accepted Islam. I had just got married. By the way, I was looking into Islam with my girlfriend. I had a girlfriend. We were looking into Islam together. When I embraced Islam, she embraced Islam a week after me. We married a month later. And we actually went to live with my parents because I wasn't financially able. And alhamdulillah, her parents, my parents were very supportive. We actually lived with both of them. Like we lived with one period of time with my parents. My father became a Muslim, alhamdulillah. And when we went to live with my in-laws, her little brother, my wife's little brother at the age of 15 embraced Islam. And alhamdulillah, my mother, after a while, you know, she kind of got accustomed. She used to think, you know, things were extreme. She used to say a lot of things that she saw in the news. And she used to say, I'm Catholic, born Catholic, and that's how I die. And I remember telling her, you know, if Allah wants to guide a good person because of their goodness, He'll do it. So you're a good person and I know it. So if Allah wants to guide you, He'll guide you. And subhanAllah, after about 3 years, she embraced Islam as well.
Very blessed, mashallah. With you, brother Abdul Rahman, anybody become Muslim?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as when I was thinking about Islam, and then right after, I called my mom. I'm very close to my mom. And after Islam, I called my mom and I apologized to her. Then I called my sister, did the same thing. And I talked to my father. And I told them all, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, I became Muslim. I was telling them what it is and everything. And subhanAllah, yeah, they noticed that, I mean, my father, he actually was the one who was pretty pointed. He had some pretty pointed questions for me, you know, are you going to kill me now? It's at night or something. And I said, no, of course not, you know. No. And subhanAllah, of course, I didn't have the wisdom, you know. You get a fire in your pants, you get really excited, you know, you just have to tell people about Islam. But once you gain that wisdom, through this trial and error, process of trial and error, and also counseling from brothers who do have